Right now, somewhere, a narcissist is sitting with a silence they weren't prepared for. Maybe they're scrolling through your old messages. Maybe they've called 3 times and haven't left a voicemail, because leaving a voicemail would mean admitting they need something. Maybe they're telling their friends that they ended it, that they got bored, that you were too clingy, that they outgrew you. The story is clean, rehearsed, convincing. But underneath that story, something is fracturing. Because you weren't just another person in their life. You were the person who saw them, really saw them, and kept showing up anyway. You gave them something that is almost impossible to replace: unconditional emotional presence. And the moment you stopped giving it, whether you left all at once or simply emotionally withdrew, their entire carefully constructed world began to shake. What happens to a narcissist when they lose an empath isn't what most people expect. It isn't clean. It isn't indifferent. And understanding it isn't about satisfying a need for revenge. It's about finally, fully understanding what you were dealing with, so you can stop questioning yourself and start healing. Here's something most people get wrong about empaths and narcissists. It was never a one-sided transaction. Yes, narcissists are takers. Yes, they drain energy, they manipulate, they rewrite reality. But they aren't indifferent to who they're draining. Empaths specifically are chosen, not randomly, but with a kind of intuitive precision that Dr. Ramani Durvasula, one of the leading experts on narcissistic personality disorder, describes as the narcissist's ability to identify high empathy targets from the earliest moments of connection. Why empaths? Because empaths don't just give love. They give the kind of love that tries to understand. They look at brokenness and Hink, I can help fix this. They see the wounded child behind the rage, the insecurity behind the arrogance. And for a narcissist, being truly seen, even partially, is intoxicating. It's terrifying, but it's intoxicating. Think about someone like Clara, who spent 3 years in a relationship with a man named Dominic. She used to say, "I feel like I'm the only person who actually gets him." And she wasn't wrong. She did get him. She saw through the performance, and she stayed. That is exactly what makes an empath so valuable to a narcissist. Not just the love, but the loyalty behind the love. Narcissistic supply, the attention, admiration, and emotional energy narcissists feed on, is available from many sources. But the deep, understanding, forgiving presence of an empath, that is rare. And when it disappears, the narcissist doesn't just lose a relationship, they lose their most potent source of psychological stabilization. The first thing that happens when a narcissist loses an empath isn't grief, it's panic. Real grief requires empathy, the ability to feel loss for the other person, not just for yourself. Most narcissists, particularly those with narcissistic personality disorder, don't have full access to that kind of grief. What they do experience immediately and viscerally is a destabilization of their carefully maintained sense of self. Dr. Gabor Mate writes extensively about how early emotional trauma becomes the foundation of narcissistic adaptation. The narcissist built a false self as a child, a performance designed to earn love and avoid abandonment. When an empath leaves, that old wound cracks open, not consciously, but in the body, in the anxiety, in the fury. You may have experienced this firsthand. The moment you pulled back, even slightly, you likely saw a sudden shift. The charm came back out of nowhere. The tears arrived, the grand apologies, the love bombing, the sudden ability to talk about feelings they claimed they'd never had. This isn't change. This is panic management. And if the charm didn't work, something else appeared. Contempt, rage, smearing. The narcissist who becomes cruel in the face of rejection isn't doing it from a position of strength. They're doing it from a place of profound, unregulated fear. The mask slipped, and what you saw underneath wasn't nothing. It was chaos. This is real. You're not imagining the whiplash you experienced. It was never about you doing something wrong. It was about what your departure threatened to reveal. Within days, sometimes hours, you'll hear that they've moved on. There's a new person. There are photos. There's a conspicuous happiness on display, usually in places where you can still see it, because what's the point of performing if the audience has left? This is called the rebound in casual conversation, but in psychological terms, It's something more specific. It's panic-driven supply acquisition. The new person isn't a replacement for you. They can't be. They're a temporary patch over a wound that the narcissist doesn't have the tools to heal. Trauma experts describe this pattern as object constancy failure. The inability to maintain a stable, nuanced sense of another person over time. The narcissist doesn't bond the way secure people bond. They consume. And when one source is depleted or removed, they move to the next with urgency, not with joy. Here's what you need to understand about what the new person is experiencing. They are exactly where you were at the beginning. The attention feels blinding. The connection feels once in a lifetime. They are in the love bombing phase. And they have no idea what's coming. That's not something to celebrate. It's something to quietly grieve for a stranger, and then release. Because while that performance is happening for an audience of one, the narcissist is still thinking about you. Not out of love, necessarily, but out of unfinished psychological business. You left before they were done with you. That is something a narcissist cannot easily metabolize. This is where we need to go deeper, because what happens inside the narcissist's mind is something they will never let you see. Beneath the bravado, beneath the new relationship, beneath the narrative of, "I'm fine, I'm thriving," there is something Carl Jung would have recognized immediately. Shadow exposure. The empath, in their radical acceptance, held up a mirror. They reflected back both the narcissist's grandiosity and their wound. When the empath leaves, the mirror goes with them. What remains is the unprocessed truth of who the narcissist actually is, without the cushion of an empath's endless understanding. Psychologists who work with clients who have narcissistic traits describe something called narcissistic collapse, a period of profound internal disintegration that can follow a significant loss, especially the loss of a primary supply source. It doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like a manic burst of activity. Sometimes it looks like rage that doesn't quite make sense in proportion to what triggered it. Sometimes it looks like a string of meaningless connections that go nowhere. What it rarely looks like is peace. You may never get to witness the collapse directly, and that's actually by design. The narcissist's entire architecture is built around ensuring you never see the truth of their internal state. But knowing it exists, knowing that your departure created real consequence in someone who spent years convincing you that you were the disposable one, that knowledge matters. Not for revenge, but for your own reality. Because so many empaths leave these relationships carrying a devastating lie, that they didn't matter, that they were easy to forget, that they were just another chapter quickly turned. You were not. Your instincts were right about that. So what does all of this actually mean for you? It means the confusion you felt wasn't weakness. It was a completely rational response to an irrational dynamic. It means the love you gave wasn't wasted, even when it was exploited. It means your capacity for empathy, which may feel like your greatest wound right now, is in fact your most extraordinary strength, one that simply needs to be redirected towards someone worthy of it, starting with yourself. Here's the reframe that changes everything. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't too loving. You weren't too forgiving. You were a full-feeling human being in a relationship with someone who didn't have the emotional vocabulary to honor what you were offering. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of their limitation. Psychological research on trauma bonding, including foundational work by Dr. Patrick Carnes, shows that recovery from these relationships requires one specific shift above all others, moving from "what is wrong with me" to "what happened to me." The first question keeps you trapped in self-blame. The second opens the door to actual healing. You're allowed to grieve this relationship without glorifying it. You're allowed to feel the love that was real to you, even knowing it was never fully reciprocated. You're allowed to set boundaries that protect your healing, which means limiting contact, refusing to monitor their new relationship, and refusing to use their behavior as evidence about your value. Their chaos is not your curriculum anymore. You came into this knowing something felt deeply wrong, but maybe not being able to name it. Maybe you've been carrying the weight of wondering whether any of it mattered, whether you mattered. And I want to leave you with something that I hope you'll hold on to long after this ends. The narcissist didn't lose a person when they lost you. They lost a mirror that was kind enough to still show them something good. They lost a presence that absorbed their darkness and kept returning with light. They lost the one relationship that, had they been capable of genuine vulnerability, might have actually reached them. That is an enormous loss, and the fact that they will never fully acknowledge it doesn't make it any less real. You are not what they said you were in the worst moments. You are not the version of you that emerged after years of being slowly diminished. You are the person who survived something psychologically sophisticated and deeply disorienting. And you are still here, still asking questions, still seeking understanding. That is not weakness. That is the most resilient thing a human being can do. The healing you're building now, the boundaries, the self-trust, the quiet reclamation of your own reality, that is the life they never could have given you, and it was yours all along. You were never too much. You were exactly enough for someone who was never enough for you.